Divide both sides by 0.06. That would give me x minus 3.78 equals 1.95 divided by 0.06. Then we'd add 3.78 to both sides, so you should come up with x equals 1.95 divided by 0.06 plus 3.78. I don't know what that comes out to, but everyone should come out with the same value if they plug that in.
So could we have multiplied by like 100 to clear the decimals, or is that probably just like a huge waste of time?
If you can use your calculator, why clear the...
Yeah, that's right.
If you got to do it by hand, maybe you'd want to clear the decimals by multiplying by 100, but since I'm going to use my calculator, I'm just going to do this.
32.5. Or actually,
32.5?
Yeah.
Okay, 32.5. Yeah.
Number 32.
32. Ooh, I'm in the wrong one. All right, 32 says we have 1 over 5x, we have 1 over 4x, we have 1 over 3x, and we have a negative 17 over 60. So for number 32, we need to clear the fractions. Let me write these down really, really quick. 1 over 5x minus 1 over 4x plus 1 over 3x equals negative 17 over 60. So we need to clear our fractions. So we need a lowest common denominator. The easiest way to get the lowest common denominator is to first deal with the numbers. 60 is the biggest number I see in my denominator, so I'm going to make sure 3, 4, and 5 go into it. 3 goes into 60, 4 goes into 60, and 5 goes into 60. So my lowest common denominator is going to have a 60 in it to take care of the numbers. And 3 of the denominators have an x in it, so I need to at least throw an x in my lowest common denominator. Now what you're going to do is you're going to multiply both sides by that 60x. And let me put the answer up. So if I multiply both sides by 60x, we're going to clear the fractions and end up with x equals negative 1, which is conditional because if I plug a negative 1 back in, it does not cause a problem. It does not create a 0 in our denominator. Is that good enough, or do you want me to?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Yeah. 29. 29 says we have 1 over w minus 1, minus 1 over 2w minus 2, and equals 1 over 2w minus 2. All right, let me write that out really quick. The mistake in this one would be to come up with your lowest common denominator. And if you would cover your lowest common denominator and say, well, it's w minus 1 times 2w minus 2, that is going to create a really hard problem. Instead, what I wanted you to recognize was the fact that 2w minus 2 actually equals 2 times w minus 1. So if I multiply both sides by this 2w minus 1, I can clear all of these denominators because they're both equal to each other. So let me quickly take a picture of what that would look like. So I multiply the left-hand side by the form 2 times w minus 1 because I did have this w minus 1. These would cancel out. I'd be left with the 2. I also know that this is equal to 2w minus 2, so this will cancel out with that 2w minus 2, which would give me minus 1, and the other side they'll cancel out with just 1. And it's going to be an identity because 1 equals 1. I did have a class that thought it was inconsistent, or someone in a class that thought it was inconsistent because they came up with 1. But note, it would be 1 equals 1, not w equals 1. If it was w equals 1, then it would be inconsistent because plugging a 1 back in would break this. But since it's 1 equals 1, all that's saying is both sides are the exact same. It's not saying W equals 1. So it is identity still. Are all those steps good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Other questions? Yeah.
For number 20, like once you get to 5a equals 6a, why is a equals 0?
Because, so if you have 5a equaling 6a, right? And I need to get the a's on both sides. What I would either do is I would either subtract 6a or I would subtract 5a from both sides. So we're at 20 and we're at 5a equals 6a. You might be able to stop here and just say, well, 0 is the only thing that works in it because 1 doesn't work. But yeah, if I subtract 5a from both sides, that looks like a 6, but it is a 5. You come up with 0 equals a, or a equals 0. So it would be conditional because 0 works. Other questions? Okay, then we'll go right into, so section 1.2a is primarily word problems. We're going to start out by solving for variables. Because if you take an ACT or an SAT as of late, you probably recognize that almost every version I've seen, they at least have one problem where you have to solve for a variable, where you aren't given numbers, you just are given a formula that says solve for r sub 1 or solve for a. So we're going to spend a little time solving for given variables. Then we'll get into word problems. Nothing super terribly hard. I think the last one in the homework's a little hard. Tomorrow we'll step it up because we'll get into mixing problems, work problems, like George can paint a house in half an hour and Fred can paint a house in 45 minutes. How long? It'll be okay. It will be okay. The only hard part about those is deciding which type of problem it is. All right. But we're going to start off just solving for variables, so we'll start out easy. It says area equals 1/2 base times height. It says solve for height. Doesn't matter they don't have any numbers. We can still solve for height. We just need to get h all by itself. So we need to get this guy all by itself. So we need to get rid of the 1/2 and we need to get rid of the b. To get rid of the 1/2, if I'm getting rid of a fraction, I'm just going to multiply by its reciprocal, which would be 2 over 1. In other words, I'm just going to multiply both sides of the equation by 2. So if I multiply the left side by 2, we're going to have 2 times a. That's going to equal 2 times that 1/2 bh. Well, 2 times 1/2 is just 1, so we are going to have 2a equals b times h. Although b is not a number, it's holding the place for a number. So anything we could do for a number, if this was 3h, I would just divide by 3. If this was 4h, I would divide by 4. So anything I would do with a number, we're going to do with that b. So we are going to divide both sides by b. And then we're just going to have, well, 2a divided by b is going to equal h. Or in other words, h equals 2a over b. We have h by itself on one side, everything else on the other side. If you're ever confused, just ask yourself, what would I do if there was a number there instead of a letter? All right, now we're going to go down to that Celsius. That's a good one. I've seen that a lot, where they're like, I give you Celsius, solve for the Fahrenheit version of it. So I want Fahrenheit equals some number. So I want to get the F by itself. So we're just trying to get this F by itself. Now, rather than distributing that 5/9 to both things, I'm going to get rid of that 5/9 right off the bat. I'm going to move that to the other side. I'm just going to say, well, if I multiply by the reciprocal on both sides, the reciprocal of 5 over 9 would be 9 over 5. If I multiply that on the left side, and I do the same thing to the right side, it'd be times 5 over 9, f minus 32. We're going to see that 9 over 5 times 5 over 9 just equals 1. In other words, 45 over 45 equals 1. So we are just left with 9 over 5 times our Celsius is going to equal our Fahrenheit minus 32. Well, once I have that taken care of, I just have to add 32 to both sides. And then we're just going to have Fahrenheit equals our 9 over 5 Celsius plus 32, because maybe I'll write that down. I'm adding 32 to both sides. Any questions on either one of those two? All right, nothing really interesting happens with solving for t. It is just basic brute force. Go through it. So let's go ahead and solve for t. So we're starting off with s equals p plus p, whoop, that's an r, p r t. I am trying to solve for that t, so I got to get everything else off that side. When you are solving for an equation, if you remember, we have PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. When you're solving for a variable or you're solving for an equation, you do it opposite. You want to do your subtraction first, or your subtraction and addition first. So my first step is going to be to subtract the p to the other side. That is going to give me s minus p equals p r t. My next step would be multiplication. We do have p, r, and t. You could just divide by p on both sides, but then in your next step, you'd have to divide by r in both steps. So a shortcut would be just dividing by pr on both sides. And we can do that because pr divided by pr just equals 1. And then we come up with just our t equals s minus p over p r. More interestingly is that solving for the p, or the principal. And here's where we get a problem. Let me rewrite the equation. So we have s equals p plus p r t. Here is the giant problem here. There are 2 p's. So if you're just someone that's just going to brute force this, you might look at this and go, well, let's just divide by RT. The problem with dividing by RT is then you'd put P over RT on this side. That would not combine these two things together. You cannot add these two things together. You cannot subtract these two things together. So anything that's pushing them together like that is not going to work. Yes?
Why can we not divide it by RT?
Oh, let's do it. So if I was to divide by RT, divide this by RT, to rewrite this without doing any simplification, you'd have S over RT equals P over RT plus PRT over RT. You'd have to, so it'd get rid of the RT there, but it just moves it to the other P. So you kind of end up in this like loop. Now I multiply by RT and then it moves back to the other one. So that is not going to work. What can I do instead in one step to go from 2 P's to just having 1? Yeah?
You take out a P, so it's 1 plus R.
You can factor out a P. And you should probably put a star by this because it shows up a lot. I guarantee there will be at least one on the test that you'll have to do this on. So we are going to factor out a P. That means we're going to take out a P out of both of these and put it in front. So that's going to give me S equals P times 1 plus RT. Now I just have 1P. It's being multiplied by 1 plus RT. So my next step is just divide this side by 1 plus RT because that will cancel out this and turn it to 1. But what I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So we divide the other side by 1 plus RT. I just have P alone on the right, so we're just going to have P equals S times 1 plus RT. And we are done. Know how to factor it out. If you ever have 2, think, is factoring out an option here? Questions on any one of those? All right, another good question is the next one. It's pretty easy once you know what's going on. It's a good question because A, it asks you to replace variables with numbers, and then B, it asks you to solve something that has fractions. So it's a good little question that makes you do two things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to replace our r and our r sub 1. So instead of having 1 over r on the left-hand side, we are going to have 1 over our r value, which equals 7. On the left side, we have 1 over r sub 1. So instead of r sub 1, we are going to have a 10. And finally, we are going to add 1 over, I don't have anything to replace r sub 2 with, so we're just going to have r sub 2. Now I'm going to look at this. We have fractions. I want to get rid of those fractions. There's a couple ways, but the way we've been doing it lately is just coming up with a lowest common denominator. Can someone tell me what my lowest common denominator is on this problem? Yeah. It would be close. So 70 works, but we're missing an element. Yes? 70 r sub 2. Remember, we need to multiply all of them. So I need to multiply that 7 by that 10, and that 70 times the r sub 2. And we'll see why we need that r sub 2, because when we multiply both sides by 70 times r sub 2 on the left side is going to equal, multiply 70 r sub 2, that's a 7. Let's make it 7d, just for the fun of it. 70 r sub 2 times that total right side, which would be 1 over 10, plus 1 over r sub 2. I'm going to finish this up here. So we have 70r squared, or r sub 2, times 1 over 7 on the left-hand side. Well, that's just 70r sub 2 divided by 7. So we're going to be left with 10r2. On the right-hand side, when we distribute this 70r sub 2 to that 1/10, we are taking 70r sub 2 divided by 10, which is going to equal 7r2. And finally, we multiply that 70r sub 2 times that 1 over r2. We are taking 70r sub 2 dividing by r sub 2, so my r sub 2s are going to turn to 1. So in fact, just left with 70. Luke, if you would have forgot that r sub 2, you wouldn't have got rid of that last fraction.
Oh, okay.
You would end up with 70 over r sub 2, which works because you just multiply both sides by r sub 2, but we already did that with multiplying by r sub 2. All right, let's go ahead and subtract 7r2 from both sides, so minus 7r sub 2. That's going to give me 3r sub 2 equals 70. Not going to be a super nice thing. It's just going to be r sub 2 equals 70 divided by 3. All right, we also have 3 formulas that you need to know on the bottom, because in the homework I might just say calculate the interest. All right, then you have to know to use this simple interest formula. Let's go over what these elements are. This I is how much interest. So interest amount. So it might be, I don't know, you spend $100 and you invest it in something over like a year. That's the amount of money on top of it. Maybe you made $10 on your investment, so that might be your $10. That P is called your principal. It's your principal. But for our questions that we're asking, this is kind of like our initial amount. Yeah. So if I'm investing $100, that would be my $100. Like if I'm investing $100 in a tech company, $100 is the principal that I started off with. R is just our rate, which is usually given to you in a percent symbol, which you're going to have to change to a decimal. In this equation, don't leave it as a percent. You're going to change that to a decimal. And finally, T is time. So a real quick example would be like a bank account. If I have $100 in a bank account and it's paying, 3% interest, then after a year, we calculate our interest by going 100 times 0.03 times 1 year. The time is always going to be in years unless you're dealing with a weird problem, but time is almost always in years. Temperature, you know, you have Celsius, you have Fahrenheit. Uniform motion, that is going to be distance equals rate times time. An example would be if I'm going 40 miles per hour and I travel for 1 hour, we'd have 40 miles per hour times 1 hour equals 40 miles. So distance equals rate times time. That is uniform motion. Uniform is just implying it's going the same speed the whole time. All right, let's get to a couple word problems. Strategy for solving word problems. I feel like an ACT prep person if I went through all of these steps with you, and then it gets really boring. Just my big thing is make sure you read. Draw unicorns. Yes. Oh, I thought you said unicorns.
Like the Singapore word problem.
Okay. My big things from this section are read carefully. I can't tell you how many times that students have questions and then I just read it to them slower and then they get it. Just a second. My second advice to you, my second piece of advice to you is come up with an equation. And I don't mean an equation like 3x plus 4 equals 99. I mean come up with a common sense thing. This plus this has to equal this. And that's what we're going to do in this first example. Is we're just going to come up with a common sense equation without x's, without y's, just a common sense equation. So we have someone buying a 1982 DeLorean DMC-12 for a total cost of $18,966, including sales tax. If the sales tax rate is 9%, then what amount of tax did she end up paying? What I mean by coming up with a common sense thing is look at that $18,966. Just in normal English, what plus what has to equal that $18,966? What two things have to be added to equal that total? Yes?
The price and the sales tax.
The price plus the tax equals our total cost. So that sentence right there, that's all I'm thinking in my head is, this is what I'm thinking in my head is price plus tax equals $18,966. Are there any variables that I had to do here? Not yet. We will come up with variables, but just in your head, just picture an equation for, especially when it's a short sentence like this, it usually just is an equation. Just think what plus what equals our total. Now we'll put some information down for this. So we need the price of the car, and we also need our tax. Because we need the price of the car plus the tax equals our total price of the car. Well, it doesn't even tell me anything about the price of the car. All we know is the total price. So since I know nothing about the price of the car, we have to put a variable with it. I'm going to call it X. For sales tax, we do know something about it. It is 9%. So our tax, let me just move this real quick. Our tax is 9%. So if I wanted to calculate how much tax she paid on this car, 9x over 100, that would work. I'm going to do 0.9 times x, but yours will be 100% fine. I'm just assuming I can use a calculator on this one. And based upon what Jack told me, price plus tax equals my total price. So using my variables, we have x plus 0.09x has to equal that 18,966. In other words, price plus tax equals our total cost. Whew. All right, our next one, we're just going to solve this. Yeah.
though? Because like, isn't the tax like on the original price and then that's added on?
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Oh.
We are saying take that original price, multiply it by that 9%. That'll give me the tax she paid
Yeah.
when we add these. So I am doing the original price. It wouldn't make sense to do the 18,966 times 0.09 because now you're paying tax on something that already was taxed. All right, then solving this, we need to factor out that x because we have two of them. Yeah, Jack.
Is it possible just to add them together to 1.09?
Yes. You got me. I'm going to go through the steps. All right, 1 plus 0.09 equals 18,966, which is going to be 1.09x equals 18,966. There is definitely a way. Total cost of a car, or total cost when tax is involved, will always be this equation. So it is possible just to jump straight to this equation knowing she paid 9% sales tax because it was always worked this way. What this actually says, this 1 holds on to the original price and this 0.09 adds on to the tax. So you could start here. Otherwise, just do the steps to get to here. All right, we now know 1.09 times x equals our total cost. So to solve for x, we're going to say x equals 18,966 divided by 1.09. And can someone give me that total? 17,400. Thank you. And then that's my answer. I'm done.
No.
I get. Oh no, no. I didn't read the rest of the question. The rest of the question said, what amount of tax did she pay? There's two ways to calculate. Can someone tell me one way to calculate the tax knowing this value? Yeah.
Subtract the price from the total.
Subtract our total price. So we do 18,966. Subtract away the cost of the car, which would be 17,400. And what does that come out to? 1,566. So we'd have $1,566 in tax. Can someone tell me another way that I could have done this? Yeah, Aiden. 0.09 times the 17,400, right? Yep, that will also give you 1566. Both are valid ways. I wouldn't take off points for either way doing it. Questions on this one? Nick. Head up. Thanks. All right, last one. We have Chinese workers unearthing some ancient warriors that were guarding the tomb of an emperor. Then they tell us that the length is 40 yards longer than 3 times the width. If its perimeter is 640 yards, what are the length and width? So I'm looking at perimeter. Perimeter is length plus width, so 2L plus 2W. But that isn't the important part just yet. What I'm more concerned with is the sentence that says it has a length that is 40 yards longer than 3 times the width. My advice to you on a sentence like that, start with the thing we know nothing about. We know something about the length. We know it's 40 yards longer than 3 times the width. So we actually know something about the length. We don't know anything about the width right now. So I'm going to let width equal my variable x. Now I know something about the length. The length is 40 yards longer than 3 times the width. So if I multiply the width by 3 times, so that'd be 3x, and I add 40 to it, that would get me my total length. So right now we have a rectangular pit that has a width of x and a length of 3x plus 40. That matches the sentence. My length is 40 yards longer than 3 times my width. Now we go to the next part. It says its perimeter is 640. Remember, so if our perimeter equals 640. Perimeter is 2 times our width plus 2 times our length is going to equal 640. But now I'm going to insert those variables that we matched up with each one. We said that width is going to be my x, and length was actually that 3x plus 40. Now it's just some brute force solving. We are going to have 2x. Distributing this 2, we will have plus 6x plus 80 equals 640. 2x plus 6x is going to be 8x. Subtract 80 from both sides, you come up with 560. So my x equals 70. I'm going to actually finish this on the left-hand side, on the bottom there. I'll put it in red. So our width actually just is going to be that 70 because our width equaled that x. So width is going to equal 70. Our length is going to equal 3 times x, so that'll be 3 times 70, plus 40 is going to equal 210 plus 40 equals 250, and maybe I'll put yards after them. And we're finito on that. You will lose hundreds and hundreds of points. No, you will not.